Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to some, and good evening to the viewing audience across the pond. This is a special early morning Thursday edition of This is Revolution podcast. So excited to be trying this out with my good friend, Ralph Leonard. He can only do it. We wanted to do it for some reason. We could only get it done on a weekday, and I didn't want to do a pre-recorded show. I was like, you know what, let's try something different, and let's just do it live. So for those that can only watch it live because they live across the pond, welcome. You can watch us live during the week. Is this something we may roll out more consistently in the future? I do not know. I do wake up early on a daily basis, ridiculously early, and I could do this or get it out of the way. But I am going up north. It is the birthday of two of my kids, the oldest and the youngest, 26 and 6. So I'm going to go have a nice birthday get together. So I'm going to be leaving soon after this. So excited. Also, the system that we use to stream live has rolled out a new feature. I've been complaining with them. You guys have no idea the back end issues we've been dealing with, and the angry mad at the manager messages and emails these people have been getting from me as things have been changing. There's been not shows lost, they've lost some shows in the past, but not necessarily that, but just technical problems that you guys, thank goodness, don't have to see or deal with on the back end that I'm scrambling like mad to fix and work with them. They're like, hey, we just rolled out a new feature. You can upload your own music. So the music is a key for me to look at the camera. And lets me know that the theme music is over, right? And I'm live. So don't pick your nose. Don't dig in your eye. Mute it if you fart. And they're like, you can upload your own music. I said, so I can upload more stuff I do that people complain about? Oh, fuck yeah. So excited. Oh, it's a dream come true. Dream come true. I hate the AI generated music. And there's like 12 different genres and everything sounds the same. Sounds like I'm stuck in the elevator to hell. Like that's what my hell sounds like, is the AI generated music. I don't know if it's the future of music, but it does speak to a moment where we do love just random noise in the background. But now I can have cool sounds in the background. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get into a depressing conversation. Maybe not so much depressing as it is anger inducing. UK race riots. I know people might think, well, it's over. Race riots are over. Racial tensions are done now. Those angry white people got to yell. They got it out of their system. They beat up some brown people. They destroyed some property. It's over. You're late. I don't think so. And I don't try to chase news. I want to understand what's going on. I spoke to Ralph about this some weeks ago. He lives in the middle of it. And he's black. Ish. He's black enough. He's black enough to get effed with. Black. Ralph is black. Look at his hair. That's not fake. Them his real ass naps. I'm going to go to the UK and Ralph's going to punch me in the chest real hard one good time. In the 2016 presidential race, Donald Trump popularized the term fake news, a simplistic critique aimed at liberal mainstream media outlets like CNN. This phrase captures the way news can be manipulated, reflecting the political leanings of various stations, much like the concept of kayfabe in professional wrestling, where the audience is kept in the dark about the predetermined nature of matches. In the wake of recent riots in the UK, this manipulation of information has come to a head following the July 29th brutal stabbing of three young girls attending a Taylor Swift themed yoga session inside. Everything about that so interesting. In Southport, a flurry of misinformation swept across social media. It was initially reported that their attacker was a 17-year-old Muslim immigrant, fueling racial tensions. In reality, the assailant was neither Muslim nor an immigrant. He was born in Wales. However, these facts were quickly overshadowed by a wave of false narratives propagated by far right influencers like Tommy Robinson and everybody's favorite fucking human trafficker, Andrew Tate. Side note, look, if you dig dude because he was a fighter and he's a pretty good fighter, he would kick my ass. If I'm just standing up against Andrew Tate, I'm gonna get my ass handed to me. I'm not a professional fighter. I gotta hit him with a bottle bat. That being said, that dude is a goofy looking fucker. I just don't get it. As mainstream media struggle to keep pace with these online gossip networks, the lines between verified news and baseless rumor blurred, creating a dangerous cycle of misinformation. This raises critical questions. Do we trust the media to tell us the truth or simply what we want to believe? What are the deep seated roots of racial tensions between newly arriving immigrants and the people of England? How will the UK government respond to the rioters who attacked innocent immigrants and destroyed businesses under the guise of save our children? These issues echo the moral panics of the past, such as the satanic panic of the 80s, where children were used as a prop to push draconian legislation. With us today to discuss these pressing matters is unheard columnist and someone I feel comfortable calling my very good black British friend, Ralph Leonard. Hey,
Hi, hi.
how are you?
I'm good, good.
I do have to ask the first question. Where in the UK? Well, you don't have to say exactly the city you're in, but where are you in relation to where the riots were going off? And did anything ever try to jump off in your hood?
Well, I live in a town called Reading, which is in the southeast of England, and we we were thankfully like pretty safe from the riots because pretty much the bulk of the riots took place in like in like Southport is close to Liverpool, which is up north, and there was like a bit of rumor like about a few days after the riots, oh, that there might be some riots over here in Reading, so watch out. But literally nothing happened. It was, so to speak, fake news. And to be honest, if the far right did try to start, they would have had a death wish because Reading is kind of close-ish to London. It's like an hour and a bit away, and so we are a very diverse town, small city. We are like about a third of Reading is non-white or ethnic minority. That's the more PC term. Um, so if they tried to stir up shit here, especially where I live, then they really would have had a death warrant because you know you don't want to mess with a lot of angry West African men. I'll just put it like that.
Is that what the population mostly is? It's a lot of West Africans.
Well, it's not just West Africans, but it's like South Asians, Eastern Europeans. It's a good mix, if you will. You
A
know,
lot of immigrants is what you're
there's
saying.
yeah.
Is it an immigrant hood or is it like an immigrant kind of middle class neighborhood? Is there a cul-de-sac there?
Well, well, literally on the street I live is sort of like a bit of a neighborhood.
Mhm.
But if you like, very close to us is the street, which is more of a quote unquote immigrant hood, if
Okay.
you will.
Okay. So okay, so I get it. So what I'm gathering is because I'm from a
Yeah,
immigrant hood in California. We probably wouldn't say that, but it is
yeah,
where you put um, broke people. Like if you came from a war-torn country, the United
yeah,
States government puts you in my neighborhood. So
yeah,
like Laotians and Cambodians,
yeah,
and of course all these Negroes and El Salvadorians, and
yeah,
if you left a coup or a genocide and
yeah.
probably had to hop over a few dead relatives to get to the States, they then said, you know where you should go? In this newly impoverished community and
And
mix with angry black people, and then
and
everyone can sound the same.
that's related to the riots in a sense, because part of the riots were in, especially in these small towns,
Hmm.
were targeting like hotels where asylum seekers were hauled off by the government.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And some of them they tried to burn it down, like literally torch it, arson, set fire to it with people inside. Like in Rotherham, they tried to do it. In a town called Tamworth, they tried to do it. You know, they literally tried to burn it down because um, part of the policy of how the UK deals with asylum seekers, and this is comes from the new Labour government, is this policy of dispersal. So instead of like asylum seekers being concentrated like where immigrants usually are concentrated, like in London or even in a place like Reading or Manchester, uh, Birmingham, places like that, they would disperse them into these small towns where basically most people are white, and often these places are quite, you know, these are like the former deindustrialized
Yeah.
towns of northern England. So it's like it's like our version of the Rust Belt in
Yeah.
States, and unfortunately, that that the effect of it has fueled a lot of resentment, because often these hotels are like the places where people would organize a wedding,
Yeah.
and it's now been hauled. You can't use it because they have to house asylum seekers in there, and you know and then both like these asylum seekers can't work. They're forbidden from working
Hmm.
by the government and even participating in society. So then you get this stereotype: oh, they're leeching off us. How come they get housed in a hotel, but then you have homeless people on the street? That kind of
Hmm.
rhetoric. And then when it's happened, that's where these sort of mobs start targeting these places. Because even here, there's a hotel which is quite often used for weddings, and for a long time it was closed off to house Afghan um, asylum seekers, Afghan refugees. So like
Hmm.
the ones that came here after the Americans like pulled out of Afghanistan like a few years ago, um, and you could hear there was a bit of resentment towards it. Even like in like the pub talk, if you will, that sort of thing.
There was a Netflix. It came out on Netflix here, but I think it actually was released in the UK first,
Hmm.
and it was called His House, and it's a bit of a horror movie, haunted house movie, if you will. about a sub-Saharan African family, or just husband and wife, who come to the UK, kind of what you're describing, and then they don't get put in a hotel.
Yeah.
They get put in, and I don't know, are the hotels a post-COVID thing,
Uh,
or they've
I'm
been
not.
going on this before?
I think they are post-COVID thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this movie is a pre-COVID movie, but they put them in a neighborhood that you're describing, a deindustrialized kind of rundown neighborhood in a kind of rundown flat, and then the flat is haunted and blah 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 blah. Blah. Not going to get into it, but basically, what you find out is that the ghosts that are haunting this family, you think it's the ghost of a dead child of theirs, and you find out they basically kidnapped a child to flee.
Yeah.
And have you seen the movie?
No.
They kidnapped a child to flee, and the kid ends up dying in a boat. And they pretty much killed a kid to get out of a war torn country. Do you think movies like that work as racist propaganda, or do they work as something to humanize the refugees? Because listening to some of the news reports that I could get from what was going on and listening to what people were saying there, I was like, oh wow, a movie like that would probably rile people up more than maybe be humanizing for these refugees.
Yeah. That from what you're describing, it can serve that purpose. I'll give you a different movie that
Sure.
touches on. It's from last year by Ken Loach, the
Mhm.
British socialist director. It's like it probably is probably going to be his last film, and it's called The Old Oak, and it's about Syrian refugees who come into another deindustrialized former mining community in the north, Yorkshire, and um, and it talks about how this family come in, and they do face this resentment and this racist reaction from others, because this this community, because the point is like this community was battered by, say, Margaret Thatcher, because um, if you know that Mrs. Thatcher, you know, broke the mining unions
Mhm.
like in the 80s, and it's kind of very good because it uses like the differing struggles these communities have had. One working class, socialist, mining community, because one of the people that helps this Syrian family is a former mining organizer, um, who feels you could you get the sense that he's a very defeated man, and then how he kind of has empathy with the struggles of this Syrian family who fled who were part of the protest against the Assad regime because they wanted freedom and their democracy, but then because of the civil war and the violence, they had to flee. So I think that was a good job of humanizing both sides, if you will,
Mhm.
of this divide that you often see between the refugee and the, so to speak, native.
And that's where I found the news reports and how this story came to be so shocking. Um, how has the rapid spread of misinformation on social media platforms contributed to the escalation of racial tensions in the UK? What role did influencers like Tommy Robinson and Andrew Tate play in spreading these false narratives about the Southport incident? And this is a long multi-part question, and I'll,
Yeah.
I'll say it again if you forget. How do you see the relationship between social media and mainstream media evolving, especially as mainstream outlets increasingly rely on
Yeah.
social media as a source?
It, funny because in the aftermath of the Southport stabbings, you because the police couldn't say who the suspect was because he was underage,
Mhm.
and it only took a judge like edict to reveal who he is because of the rumors and misinformation that was surrounding it. So like they had to say, no, we're gonna have to just shut this down now. Uh, so then you had this void of information, and then you had like people like Andrew Tate, who literally used the phrase like, "Oh, he's fresh off a boat, asylum seeker," and it's weird with Andrew Tate because apparently he's a convert to Islam, yet he was pouring fuel into this anti-Muslim like racism that fueled the riots itself. Um, so that's strange, and it's not just Tommy Robinson, but also Nigel Farage,
Oh, another
who
one.
yeah, who was saying on GB News that this guy might be a Muslim. And incidentally, Nigel Farage revealed that he got that from Andrew Tate.
so so basically there's just a circle of lies. So
Yeah,
one person goes like this. I bet it was a Muslim. It was a Muslim? I heard it was a Muslim. So
yeah,
that's hey, sources say it was a Muslim. And that's what happened.
yeah.
That was the
And
game of telephone. Interesting.
and it's I would say that this the narratives that fueled this riots have been like under the surface for years because these riots just didn't come out of nowhere. Like it's wrong to just say that they just sort of puffed into existence.
Mhm.
Um, like Tommy Robinson, like before the Southport riots, like held a demonstration, and where there was around about I think 20,000 people there, which is far larger than he was able to muster when he was the leader of the EDL.
You said
Like
this happened before the riots?
yes, like a few days before the stabbings in Southport.
So this has been kind of a he can get a resurgence, if you will. And not even
Yeah,
a resurgence. Now you're saying he's back and bigger and badder than ever.
yeah, like his
Interesting.
because you have to understand the context is like last year there were similar riots in Ireland
Mhm.
over a stabbing by an Algerian immigrant who had lived in Ireland for a long time, but he stabbed a kid, and then there were similar riots in Ireland, fueled by the same very similar anti-immigrant like resentment and narratives and racial, you know, fears about demographic change, mass immigration, and how the elites, two-tier policing. That's a buzz phrase that's been used
Mhm.
recently. So that Tommy Robinson tried to get on the coattails of that last year, and he's been able to, and others, not just him. There's a whole kind of ecosystem that's been like pummeling this narrative online, where they can say they're like insurgents against the liberal establishment and their agenda for mass immigration, and their soft spot for Islam and stuff. Um, and their narrative, will point to things, so like if you listen to Tommy Robinson, people of his kidney, they'll mention stuff like the grooming gangs in Rotherham. So if in case anybody's unaware of what I'm talking about, so like 10 years ago, there was uncovered a massive scandal in places like Rotherham, which was a site of the riots as well, where like um, the sort of organized like child sex abuse gangs basically were prostituting like really young girls. Now,
Jesus.
what made this sort of racially toxic was um, the people doing the raping were predominantly of Pakistani descent,
Mhm.
and the victims were predominantly white English girls. So already from the optics of it, it's it's something very
Not a good look.
vulnerable. Yeah, it's not a good look. And what even compounds it even more is the authorities did virtually nothing for years. And you see the similar pattern, not just in Rotherham, but in other towns. And it's the same kind of towns I'm describing, like deindustrialized,
Mhm.
deprived, former mining, other industrial jobs towns. And people like Tommy Robinson or and others will have this very racialized narrative around it. So they'll say it's because of, mass immigration. It's
Hmm.
because of Islam. That's what is fueling this. That's you know, and the elite don't care about us, our people. They care about those other people, you know.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, this stuff has really does have a very toxic element to it because you know, 8 years ago, before the Brexit referendum, an MP called Joe Cox was assassinated by a far right fascist type who, you know, killed her because she was apparently a traitor.
Jesus.
Because, yeah, yeah. And we've had, people, it's weird because, after Donald Trump was nearly killed,
Mhm.
some people in Britain decide to polish our halos and say, "Oh, look at those Americans with their political violence and you know their history of politicians being targeted." It's like, bruv, recent in this past decade, we've had two MPs being assassinated,
That's
and
insane, dude.
yeah, two MPs. That's really insane, and multiple others being credibly threatened, mainly by the far right, and it it's it's just really it is there's a really toxic element to it because this stuff has been subterranean. It's been under the surface, but Southport just was the moment of opportunity where it could rise to the surface.
What seemed interesting to me, because I wasn't following it, man. I'm not plugged in, you
Mhm.
know. I'm not a fancy columnist at Unheard. But all jokes aside, I'm not plugged into everyday news like that because you can, I think, fall down certain rabbit holes of being a reactionary.
Mhm.
Um, and so people were saying on the show, "You're not talking about the UK race riots." I was like, I don't really know about it. It just happened. I don't really know about it. I don't want to really jump on something I don't know anything about.
Yeah,
And when I hit you up about it, and we were going back and forth, and then I finally started reading, what I could get from like the Guardian or Al Jazeera or just wherever I could get any news about it that wasn't from the states.
yeah,
Um, there was a narrative that reminded me a lot of two things. A, the satanic panic, because it was like, well, there's little kids
yeah,
and we have to protect the children. Everybody was saying the same thing. We have to protect the children. And once there's kids involved, the
yeah,
mob is easy to follow,
yeah.
right?
And especially
Um,
when you can be tribalistic about it, that
oh,
it's an outsider attacking our kids.
our children, right? That,
Yeah,
that and this is before you were born. In the 80s, there was this moment where child daycares and preschools were supposed to be bastions of sexual perversion and satanic worship and child murder. Now, all the studies, all the numbers that the FBI had said, the majority of child assaults, kidnappings, molestations happen in the home
hmm,
with people that children knows.
hmm,
Um, and if you get into the weeds of a lot of those stories, there was just maybe a weirdness, but I don't know if I would have said that 40 years ago. because there is a stain left in your mind post the Satanic Panic and the Catholic Church. Like those two things have put kind of weird stains in our minds about the way we view certain things. Like, for example, men that work at daycares or preschools. If they're not in like big time administrative positions, you're probably
Yeah.
going to be a little weirded out if
Yeah.
your 4-year-old has a male teacher. And you're shaking your head, yeah, and you live on the other side of the ocean. And even that affects you to this day, thinking, well, yeah, I didn't have a man, a male teacher's assistant.
Yeah.
It was a no-go after the 80s. Like you can't have them. So there's these brain worms that we have from these, some people call them pop cultural moments, but look at what we get from them. You get changes in legislation here from them that leads you to have an easier time passing the 94 crime bill and I'm talking about as far as giving more power to prosecuting attorneys and taking power away from judges in the states. That starts with the Satanic Panic. And I'm looking at the UK and listening to these people talk, and I'm like, once you start legislating on protecting children, you can pass the most insane laws,
Yeah.
take so much power away from judges and juries, and start giving people mandatory minimums for little of nothing. And also, like you said, there's a tribalistic rage that goes into the idea of someone trying to defile innocence. So I get the idea of the rage,
Yeah.
but the rage is hard to turn off when the truth is presented to you.
Yeah. And I should mention that when Keir Starmer went to Southport to, commemorate the lives of the kids that were killed, he was heckled by the community, saying, one of them was saying, "How much more, Prime Minister? When will you protect our children? How long can this go on?" Stuff like that. And people like Tommy Robinson will have this ideological narrative that will say, "Look at the Manchester Arena bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the grooming gangs. Look at the beheading of Rigby. There's a pattern here. They're trying to, because as humans we are pattern-seeking mammals and this sort of thing. And look, what's the common denominator?" And that's when he'll pull in his racist, anti-immigration, anti-Muslim specifically agenda. And what's in bolstered this radical right wing movement is the fact that we've had 14 years of a Tory government that have consistently said, "Oh, our policy is to reduce immigration to the tens of thousands." I mean, I even remember David Cameron saying that in 2010. But the net migration figures have gone up and up and up and up. Like, I think last year, the UK had its highest ever net migration figures of around about 700,000 people. Highest net migration figures ever.
Jeez. And that was do you think a lot of this has to do with what's going on in Gaza?
What do you mean by that?
As far as the bombing, the genocidal war that's being, are a lot of people fleeing from that region? Like, where are most people coming from?
No, I think a lot of it is, well, first of all, some of it is the relaxation of visa rules post-Brexit, which is ironic because, and it fuels this sense of disappointment and betrayal the radical right here have towards the Tories, because they're saying we were meant to leave the European Union to reduce immigration, not to increase it even further. And the irony is that we've reduced immigration from Europe, but from outside the EU, so non-white immigration, it's increased even further. And some of it is also, for the figures last year, was people coming from Hong Kong and Ukraine. So like because of the UK sort of felt the need to like take in these large amounts of refugees from Hong Kong or people leaving Hong Kong because of the former colonial, connection and the Ukraine war. And yeah, so like there's a lot of factors that come into why that number increased. Uh, yeah.
Are they nicer to the Ukrainian and Russian refugees, or is it all the same?
Well, it's weird because the radical right, they don't, when they talk about immigration, they don't really mention Ukrainians in their
My,
in their
my
paper.
first tour in the UK in 2013, I remember someone we were somewhere and like a fast food place, like a Nando's or something,
Hmm.
and I remember kind of joking with one of the bands we were with. I was like, "Oh yeah, there's no like, I'm used to going places like this and having like Latin people work behind the counter," and someone British laughed and go, "No, no, 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 we don't have Mexicans like you people have. We have Eastern Europeans."
Yeah,
And then he joked and said, "We have Polish people."
yeah, yeah,
So there's definitely a stigma that those people have
yeah,
in your country.
yeah,
Um, but you're saying that these mobs are a little more focused on the darker hued Muslims.
yes, yes. That's really the object of their rage, because there is this also this narrative that fuels the radical right about demographic change, and they see English population as a beleaguered and declining ethnic majority that is whose way of life, whose culture, whose identity is under threat from mass immigration and you know multiculturalism and the liberal establishment's oikophobia, so like self-hatred of their own identity. That's what they say.
Mm.
And um, and that it's and to me it seems like a very mainstream version or a softer version of the great replacement theory that
Mm.
was promulgated by the French New Right in like the 80s.
Mhm.
It's and it is, because we have to be honest that that great replacement theory genie is out of the bottle. Like it's becoming more and more mainstream, and because to the extent that you'll find like commentators like Douglas Murray in
Oh,
England
oh, that guy sucks.
who who will who give a very intellectual, very lucid, very typically British with that Oxbridge cocksureness version of this story. Yeah, because he'll say that our culture is under threat and we have to resist it. That's you know, and if you read his book, like Great, The Strange Death of Europe, he pretty much laments how, like, he'll say stuff like laments how like the white British are a minority in their own capital city, London. Because
Mhm.
you know, and there is a real point to be made that England is undergoing a demographic transformation,
Mhm.
because London is majority. I won't quite say majority non-white, but it's because you have to take into account the Poles, Romanians, people like that. But it is a highly super diverse city, majority minority, as you would say in the States. And it's not just London. Birmingham is 50-50 pretty much, uh, 50% white, 50% non-white. Leicester, majority minority. Slough, Reading, Reading, where I live, demographically in the future is going to reflect more and more like London,
Mm.
and 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 that's what the right can point to,
But
and they
does that
see,
mean? But does that mean
yeah.
the food's gonna get better? Sorry, couldn't help
That's
it. You got to admit, I'm sure the food is great, dude. Next to Bangladesh, the best Indian food you're gonna get is in London. Tell me I'm
yeah.
lying. Tell me I'm
No,
lying.
no, you're not lying. I mean, George Orwell tried to defend English cooking back in the 40s, but nah,
You
nah,
can't.
he, he
I'm assuming with this wonderful influx of people from all over the world, the food must be fire right now.
oh, especially if you go to London.
Oh, just for that alone, you should be like, Tommy, calm down. Go look, go to the freaking chip shop, dude.
I
It's
mean,
fire right now.
I
Go
mean
get
the
a
ir-
kebab.
I mean
Go get a kebab.
the irony of Tommy Robinson is he's all the way in Spain, or
Hmm.
like the riots were going on, chatting his nonsense.
Nobody wants to be in the. You really want to be close to that shit? He's not trying to be a martyr. He's like,
So yeah,
please don't ruin my favorite kebab shop.
yeah. So like there is this narrative from the right that says believes that the English are a persecuted majority in their own country, like, and mass immigration is going to threaten to just change it irrevocably. That uh, you know, and this has a long history. Enoch Powell, all the way in 1968,
Mhm.
was saying, that speech, "The rivers of blood," in his very posh accent. I fear, you know, the river Tiber foaming with blood and all that kind of stuff. And
Jeez.
and it's ironic. It's ironic because when he made that speech in '68, before he said the immortal words that everybody remembers of that speech, he made a comment to the US because '68 was when there was the riots after Martin Luther King died, and he
Mhm.
was saying that racial problem over there is what's going to happen over here if enough black people come here, it keep on coming here. That's what it was basically saying, that if we want to prevent the race conflict of the US, we have to restrict mass immigration here and keep the black population at a low level.
He didn't want any Ralphs with his Windrush.
No, and it's so ironic because like Enoch Powell was a high imperialist
Mhm.
when he was younger, so he was like a full-on defender of the British Empire, and he was a very educated person, and he had this also very romantic love for India, which is actually very common for imperialists to have, like to
Mm.
have this Orientalist fascination with, you know, the Oriental culture, and it's ironic that after the Second World War and after immigration from non-white countries into Britain, that he recast himself as a little Englander provincialist, and that's why he had this anti-immigration politics. He was very anti-EU and this extreme like unionist politics. So he was very much pro the unionists in Northern Ireland who want Northern Ireland to be part of the union with Britain. And the joke about the unionists in Northern Ireland is they're more British than the British here.
I'm not going to make any Irish jokes. There's too many Irish people that watch this show. I've met some of them in real life. I'm not trying to get firebombed for a
and
joke today.
you can make the same point about Douglas Murray,
Mhm.
because Douglas Murray I'm just about young enough to remember a more baby-faced Douglas Murray. He's a neoconservative, defending the idea of the Iraq War, wars in Afghanistan. We have to promote democracy in the Middle East, and there's always this tension between that kind of seeming universalism with this very particularism of, oh, we have to stop the Muslims coming here to defend our culture. And he has, you know, undergone this strange mutation where he's become this kind of identitarian, very, narrow culturalist type,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I personally think that mutation has something to do with, and this is just me speculating, has something to do with like the disappointment of the war on terror
Hmm.
for him, because it didn't work. The democracy promotion didn't work in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was like we tried to bring the West to them, but now they're coming for the West to destroy our culture. So I think
Couldn't
that's
wipe out enough terrorists for him, huh? He tried to wipe them all out and just didn't realize that
well,
war on jealousy.
well. Now he's just a total propagandist for the IDF.
That's
Now,
even more gross.
yeah,
Jesus. Um,
yeah.
we're getting
And
close. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, it's just I also want to make the point that there's also another aspect of this debate, which is the Englishness as a national identity. This is distinct from Britishness, particularly because one of the ironies about England is all of the riots that happened recently all took part in England, aside from a small one in Belfast, but all of them took part in England. And then it's also we always get this debate every few years about Englishness as our identity, or is there a place for English patriotism, especially on the left? Like,
Mhm.
how should we, because of the fact that Britishness, because one of the complicated things is Britain has for so long basically been an extension of England. So like all the major British institutions are basically English.
Mhm.
Um, and because Britishness has transformed itself from a imperialist to a post-imperialist um, civic nationalism, so that sort of undergirds, the current multicultural Britain, because anybody can become British, just like anybody could become American
Mhm.
conceivably, because it's a civic identity, not a narrow racial, ethnic kind.
Mhm.
Even though in the 70s, all the fascists were waving Union Jacks and all that sort of thing. um, but now, because of that, and with devolution, where Scotland and Wales have had more political autonomy within the Union, then logically the question would be, well, what about England? Where does England's place in these new arrangements? Because another irony is most of the diversity, the ethnic diversity in England is in Britain, sorry, is English. You know, 80, 1/5 of England's population is non-white. Um, Scotland and Wales are about as white as England was in the 70s and 80s,
Mhm.
which is kind of funny how why their nationalists will say, "Oh, we're more open, we're more tolerant, we're more troglodytes who wave the St. George's flag and get pissed up with lager and sing bad football chants."
Whoa.
But then I would say, well, when 20% of Scotland's population is non-white, then we'll see how tolerant you really are. Well, let's see then. it's
This is
very easy. It's very easy to be anti-racist if there's just like one or two black people in your community. But what if a substantial part of the demographic of the nation is non-white? what then? You know?
Usually all hell breaks loose for a generation. Then people just they have some mixed grandkids. Then
Yeah,
by the time the Paw dies off, then people chill out a little bit. A little bit.
yeah. Because even in our pop culture,
Mhm.
most of the prominent black celebrities or prominent public figures are English. You know,
Mhm.
so it's very ironic, and especially with identification, or how people personally identify. Most of those people identify as British,
Mhm.
whereas most white English people will identify themselves as English. So that's another interesting irony there, because there is this idea that English identity is one of blood and ancestry as opposed to a political identity like Britishness or Americanness. And it's ironic. And if you look at surveys, the ethnic minorities who are more likely to identify as English are those who are mixed race. So they have an English father or a non-white mother. So
But that's not you. You're the flip flop. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Example.
Like 4 or 5 years ago,
Mhm.
5 years, maybe 6 years ago. There's a rapper named Akala
Yes, yes,
from your hood, and he wrote a
yeah,
book.
yeah.
Oh God, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about race and class in the UK.
Hmm.
I found it interesting. I find him really interesting. I've tried to get him on the show a few times. He never returns my calls. Dick. So if you see him in the streets, one light skinned mixed dude to another, just be
Hmm.
like, "Hey, my boy Jay Miles hit you up. This is Revolution. Can you hook him up?" And then you guys do the fucking handshake, secret mixed people handshake. You people have. I tease my kids about that all the time. That they have a secret handshake that they never let me in. As we're coming up on the hour, with the growing dominance of social media as the primary source for many, what does the future of news consumption look like? Will traditional media adapt or will it continue to lose ground to these new platforms? How can social media platforms be held accountable for the spread of false information, especially when it leads to real world violence
Hmm.
and societal harm? I am of the mind that I think they all work together at this point,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to disengage one from the other. And
Hmm.
that's extremely problematic because there's just no fact checking on the internet.
Yeah. I think. Um. Well, one method that I don't think helps is when um, Keir Starmer has, in reaction to the riots, basically said we're going to crack down on people who engage in hate speech, and where it involves like putting people in prison who haven't incited violence necessarily, but just spouted a horrible opinion, or horrible racist, or you know opinion. And I don't think that's really the best way to combat that sort of thing, because it just gives more power to the state. And hate speech is such a very vague category, because there have been you've had black people who've been prosecuted for hate speech. The first actually person to be prosecuted for racial hatred in Britain was a guy called Michael X.
Oh,
These.
you know who Michael X is?
Yeah.
Did you learn about him in school?
No, not in school. No, I found that out for myself.
Like recently or years ago?
No, no, in the 60s,
No, no,
68.
no. I know that happened in the 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, you found out about Michael X within the
Oh, it
last
was,
8 years or
yeah, yeah, in the last eight or
okay.
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I watched there was a how many years ago was that? I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, Adam Curtis had the docu series on BBC
Mhm.
I didn't really like it that much, actually, and I'm a bit of a Adam Curtis fan, but this one I did not like. But he talks about Michael X, and I thought he was making the person up, even with the footage. And so I started calling up all my Black historian friends, and no one knew who the hell the dude was except for one person. Cedric Johnson knew about him. So the fact that you mentioned him was like, oh no way, you know Michael X. Do you think he was a real revolutionary, or do you think he kind of rode a certain popular wave?
Now, I think he was riding on the Black Power wave that was coming around this in the 60s. Though in England, in Britain, we do our there's this thing called political blackness, which
Okay.
repurposed Black Power.
Hmm.
So like in a way that it include like Black Caribbeans and South Asians. So like some people will find it odd that in the 70s and 80s you'll find like South Asians were calling themselves black. Or I think even Stokely Carmichael, when he came to the UK in, I think it was 68 or 69, he gave a speech and he was talking about the black population of England and he was referring to Pakistanis in that
Oh
speech.
wow. And that's when Michael X was like, I see an untapped market.
Yeah,
Because the way Curtis portrays him, I think he was extremely generous. And he leaves out all of the criminal aspect of dude.
yeah.
It's like he was disillusioned with what he saw. I was like, was it disillusionment? Was it? But yeah. Uh I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a scary time. So if things die down a little bit out there,
Died down with what?
as far as the unrest over the
Oh yeah,
protests.
it's died down. It's completely, you know. And as far as like social media's role in this is that I do see that there is a problem with how like really unverified claims and tendentious like points that have the sole purpose of sort of being incendiary to a situation that no one really knows the full facts yet. I think there is a problem with that, and and the fact that someone like Nigel Farage could say on a national television show that he has on GB News, claims that the perpetrator of Southport was a Muslim, and he then later says that he got that from Andrew bloody Tate. I mean, that says a
That's a
lot.
bastion of truth right there. Whenever I think of facts, I think of Andrew Tate, right? Right.
um, but then but and yeah, the mainstream media and social media are virtually becoming more intertwined with one another. I mean, you have like mainstream journalists as much put out their work on social media as they do on like official, print media or broadcast media. You know, it's like, um, but at the same, and Elon Musk as well hasn't really helped with his what he said on the right, saying stuff like, "Oh, civil war is inevitable," um, and the fact that Elon Musk has, I mean, so palpably obvious that the way he's run Twitter is to give far right voices in a louder hearing than
Mhm.
most other people. Now, that's kind of it is. I mean, it is kind of worrying because that you can dominate a discourse and shape a discourse about whether it's to do with race,
Yeah.
immigration, and so on
Yeah.
through that way, and I'm not sure how you can really combat that because on the one hand, I don't really trust the idea of just censoring that you can just censor them because say you can
Yeah.
boot them out of Twitter, they'll just go on to
It is.
Rumble.
You're going to form Rumble. You're going to form your own social media network where the
Yeah.
truth is going to be able to live.
Yeah.
So I don't think censorship's the solution. I can listen to bullshitters talk and understand, you know, where the bullshit's coming in. The problem is there's an issue that we have with like media literacy.
Yeah.
Because of the way we engage with media. It is entertainment.
Yeah.
It's sad to say that life and death, tragedy, is our entertainment in 2024, and it has been for some time. And sometimes with entertainment, you're going to get fanatics. And when little children get murdered, especially little girls at a Taylor Swift yoga thing, that's the news. They're coming all over themselves when that happens.
Yeah.
They're like, this is better than a political assassination. We can report about this for 24 hours for the next 3 months. We can do think pieces on this 2 years later.
Because
The news isn't a public good. And I think that's the first thing we have to remember, right? When we're talking about stuff like this, no more is this the civic responsibility of corporate titans to, oh, I have a news station on the side. I make my money from Jack Benny. That's done. Cable news destroyed that. So it's a money-making venture. You have to profit. And when a situation like this, a black kid too? Oh. That's like porn to the people that own the state. The people that run the magazines, the newspapers. It's like, what? Little white girls? Hell yeah. We're getting the clicks now.
Yeah, and governments can exploit that kind of crisis to implement whatever laws they can. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Keir Starmer puts in some new restrictions on immigration just to
appease
them. And it's kind of strange because Keir Starmer, it's kind of unique because our prime minister is a cop, the director of prosecutions, Sir Keir Starmer. It's like, no, because it's true, because he is a cop. Like, he was, people, American leftists will say, "Oh, Kamala Harris is a cop." Well, Keir Starmer is a cop too, and that's what, and it is because that's how he kind of portrays himself. That I am doing a public service. This is a government of service. That's his mantra. And he, he probably wouldn't surprise me if he's been a law and order type, and and has this dual policy to appease both the far right and to placate sort of liberal centrist sort of concerns. So, like, on the one hand, prosecute racists for their hate speech, but also on the other hand, let's tighten up the immigration system to appease the far right. And the Tories have done that for the past decade as well, even though it's helped mask the fact that immigration numbers have risen higher and higher and higher, and the radical right obviously sees through that.
Yeah. No, it's that whole thing again, and watching those interviews was like, it was blowing my mind hearing these people talk about the problem was all these Muslims attacking, destroying all these shops. And you find out, well, the kid's not Muslim. He was born here. None of that mattered. The truth, by the time the truth comes out, it just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to go, well, I guess this is the post truth society people talk about. And this is a perfect example of it. No one cares, present tense, about the truth. It just doesn't matter because that hate genie's already out of the bottle, and it's going to take a minute before some people that might not have been deep into the racial hatred of it all and really got caught up into the propaganda of protecting the children. It's going to be a minute for those people
Yeah. And
to see the error of their ways.
what was particularly disconcerting for me was that in some of these demonstrations and riots was that I saw a considerable number of women at them,
Yes.
and that's a sign that to me scared me more than the fact that they were just all men, because you could you can't say this is just the usual football hooligan types who are just drunk and want an excuse to smash things.
Yeah.
The fact that you could see women there, and the issue was about protecting,
Yeah.
you know, that is because, and also that this these actions isn't just a, you know, oh, you can't say, oh, it's just that racist individual. There was a kind of form of collective action that undergirded this. And like I've tried to say before, that it does show that there is this sort of white English majoritarian identitarianism that's undergirding these riots and the narratives that you see promulgated by the likes of Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, Douglas Murray, and others like them. Yeah.
When do you get to go on the TV and debate those people? When is your moment happening?
Well, well, I don't think I'll ever get a chance to debate Douglas Murray because because 6 years ago, 6 years ago, I wrote an reviewing his
Mm-hmm.
and I basically compared him to Lothrop Stoddard, who was a racist,
Okay.
who's
And you
who was
think that's going to stop the BBC from putting you guys together on a panel?
well, it might stop him from accepting debating me.
I don't know. That guy seems pretty arrogant. I can't see him not wanting to do that. He wants to flex his
I'll,
intellectual muscle.
9 years when I was me and this friend, we were part of this like small independent journalistic venture. We did go to a Tommy Robinson protest.
That doesn't sound smart. Okay.
While we didn't meet him, I have seen him in the flesh. So just say,
You were the guy that milkshaked him a few years back.
no,
That was you.
no, that was Asian Bella.
When you were before you go, when you were at the Tommy Robinson thing, what did anybody treat you differently? Did you feel uncomfortable?
As for my personal safety, no, I didn't feel threatened at all, and most of the people weren't really aggressive or anything like that towards us.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sam is Iranian,
Mm-hmm.
of Iranian heritage, so he looks more like, if you will, visibly Muslim, quote unquote,
Gotcha.
than me, and so, but for the most part, we were okay. So like, they didn't really, pay us too much harm or bother.
Yeah, because they definitely hates Muslims more than just you colored folks.
Because it's because how over the decades has become this sort of quasi racial signifier, because, you know, decades gone past, the people we call Muslims, like I said before, they would have called themselves black or you know, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, but now the term is Muslim. You know, and that and it works from both directions, because on the one hand they get racialized from the outside, because especially after the Satanic Verses, you know, affair, that's where you really see this more. And then on the other side, there is this sort of the, you know, the usual immigrant alienation from the majority culture took this form of kind of Muslim identity. So it's less about, you know, the actual theology, you know, the actual sort of religious practice of Islam, as much as it's like kind of like a tribal kind of identity signifier, that, you know, this is my distinct, this is what makes me. So like, and, you know, and then, you know, ethnic signifiers, you know, so like, you know, the hijab and other forms like that. And that's where like the Tommy Robinson types really start focusing their nozzles at, because you know, that they'll say, you know, because like, if say you are a Muslim of a woman of a Muslim background who wears, you know, the headscarf, the hijab, for whatever reason, whether it's religious or just like cultural, you know, because it's, you know, my mother did it, so why can't I do it? That sort of thing, you know. It's like, then you know, you are a bit of a target, you know, for people like Tom Robbins, because because they see it as like you like rejecting our way of life by doing that. You are kind of excluding yourself and, you know, projecting a kind of, you know, dislike as, you know, the British or stuff like that. And you're trying to impose your values on us. You know, that's how they, because that's why they're so hostile to stuff like that.
His name is Ralph Leonard. He is a columnist at Unheard Magazine. Ralph, do you have anything new coming out?
Well, I am in the process of writing 2 essays that will come out future. One which is a review of a book called Multiculturalism: A People's History, which is written by a British academic called Kieran Connell, who has written for Tribune magazine, socialist magazine in Britain. So he's got that book coming out, which is quite interesting. And another essay which will be on Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a new Blu-ray edition coming out in England through the BFI on that film, because it's 70 years since that film came out. So, yeah.
And you're going to juxtapose it to Star Wars?
Well, that's what everybody does.
And you're not. You're gonna F it up and just not, because you were born after the good Star Wars is.
Nah, mine will be on, you know, the history of, you know, the samurai as a caste or class of people in society, and how Kurosawa's kind of paradoxical view of the samurai that's I think is quite evident in that film.
But you won't write a review on Ninja 3: The Domination. So I don't give a shit about whatever you say about samurai and classic cinema. If you can't write a review for Cracked Magazine on Ninja 3: The Domination, then why the fuck are we even talking? Just kidding. But for my money, and a child of the 80s. Ninjas were always cooler than samurais.
Well, I'm a 2000s guy, so I was more into fighting games, so like Tekken and
Oh wow, Tekken. I remember the first time I saw Tekken, I was like, dude, video games are so advanced. What's next? Thank you so much, Ralph. I appreciate you coming on and talking to me. For me this morning, for you this evening. Be safe out there. Let's enjoy the cultural diversity in your hood.
Mhm,
Let's enjoy the fact
mhm.
that everything doesn't suck anymore, food wise.
Yeah, sorry, Jorwell.
Yeah, sorry, George. So thank you so very much. We had some great shows this week. Talked about surveillance in schools on Tuesday. Pascal talked to Corey Robin last night. I'm talking to Ralph. And then Pascal and Toussaint will be back Saturday at the regular time. So I will see you guys next week. I am